mentioned we had some sound issues, and sorry about the wait. Now we're going to get started with powering up Brightfields in your community. I'm Vince Maiden, the Brownfields Program Coordinator. Just to be honest, we were off and running, and apparently you couldn't hear us, so sorry about that. So I wanted to start with what is a brownfield. So a brownfield is any property or expansion or redevelopment of property which could be complicated by the presence or potential presence of hazardous substances, pollutants, and contaminants. So in Virginia, we view that as a very broad definition which incorporates most property that people have interacted with. This could be old landfills, previously mined lands, and many more. So why are we hosting Brightfields? We wanted to promote solar development on brownfield properties from our program. Again, that includes landfills. There's a lot of old landfills in Virginia. You're going to hear some more details about that. A lot of previously mined lands and former industrial sites that we think are really ripe for redevelopment, including solar and other energy projects. This would help us preserve some green space if we went this route. We also, as our program often does, can provide local governments, assistance, landowners, and solar developers that want to redevelop a brownfield site, just like we would any other site. We're a free resource. We're available to you. It's a good place to contact. And we don't want you to miss out on Brightfields 2019, April 9th and 10th. So we're giving you a little preview of what you're going to get at that event with this webinar. You're really hopefully you'll sign up. You'll see a link here for the event. If you're a landowner, you can sign up for free. So share this with all your friends, family, colleagues, and just let's make this a great event. I'm going to turn it over to Meade Anderson, and he's going to cover a little bit more about what our program does, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you, Vince. How can we help? We're here to help you understand the issues that are on these sites, environmental issues that you might be facing on redevelopment of brownfields properties. These are very similar to any type of brownfields redevelopment out there. We can talk to you about legacy environmental concerns that we've got on properties, and I know this is a big issue on any type of landfill that's been previously developed. We can help you remove the environmental liability for prospective purchasers, and I'm going to talk about that very briefly and just down the road in a second. And we can help with potential federal and state grants, provide support letters, and things like that. Some of the tools that we have out there are to provide assistance to redevelop the property as a whole. And BFPP letters, comfort lender liability letters, contiguous property owner letters, and tenant BFPP letters. We have provided all of those on Brightfield redevelopments and typically provide them on quite a few of the typical brownfield type sites out there. We can help you resolve outstanding regulatory issues such as USTs. They tend to be present on almost all sites, including some of the more green Brightfield sites. Farm tanks are one of the things that has popped up previously. We can assist with VRP enrollment if that's the route that the old landfill, for example, needs to take, and help you resolve drainage and cover issues. And those are two things that you do need to have covered on landfills, or the cap or cover needs to be intact. Brightfielding brownfields lands. We've got plenty of property out there. There's over 100,000 acres in Southwest Virginia alone of formerly mined lands. We know that we have more than 650 pre-regulation landfills. Many are sitting idle. Sometimes they have shooting ranges on them. Sometimes they're just overgrown or bush hogged several times a year. We would love to help with these pre-regulation landfills. They are closed, and that's what we're going to consider them unless there's an issue out there. I've mentioned cap and cover repair. And again, if cleanups needed, we can help the property owner work their way through the VRP. That's the regulatory vehicle that we would recommend if cleanup is actually necessary. And a redevelopment arm of DEQ, so we can provide the flexibility to facilitate redevelopment as we go forward. Anyway, that's enough of us. Here's our contact information, and I'm going to hand it off.
So our next speaker is going to be Dan French with brownfieldlisting.com. And Dan's got a couple of folks he's worked with in the solar world that are really going to give us some good information over the next couple presentations. You'll just have to bear with us as we change speakers, and we'll continue on.
Thanks, Vince. I think I'm receiving the controls. Thank you, Virginia DEQ, for hosting. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Awesome. So as Vince said, I'm Dan French with brownfieldlistings.com. We're a nationwide redevelopment marketplace, in case you haven't heard of us. I encourage you to sign up for our website. You can be a user for free. You can post sites for free. Our newsletter is free, so there's a lot of things that you can do on brownfieldlistings.com. I'll get back to that in a second, but Vince and Mead asked me to just kind of start really big picture and talk about real estate kind of in general, and then move into Brightfields, because it is such an incredible time. And the purpose of the webinar is not a market brief, but I think if you're dialing into this call, you know that there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in real estate, particularly in some of the forgotten corners of real estate. Brownfields and grayfields are getting really interesting again. Brownfields are really in record demand, and we see it happening in all kinds of markets from coast to coast in all kinds of different ways, really across the spectrum. Even industrial property has more than doubled in recent years. There's a lot of reasons why, and we get asked the question as kind of a recession approaches, like, oh, is the redevelopment boom going to die because the recession is around the corner? Is this kind of a one shot? We've had a really good run since 2008, especially relative to the rest of the world. Is it about to end soon? Interest rates are going up, and the answer is really no. And it's because of why and how we are growing through this recession or this recovery. A recession will probably be cyclical. We have these every so often, but our recovery has been structural. Some of the very important bedrock foundational things of our economy have changed in a big way. And one of those things, just my bio real quickly, is I worked in the energy space a lot. I used to work for British Petroleum. I care a lot about energy. And as I'm sure you probably know, we've doubled oil production in the last 10 years. And we've got a lot of fracking online, a lot of natural gas, so much to export. And even in that environment with kind of a mini carbon boom, coal has been left out, unfortunately, mostly due to natural gas because it's so cheap. But we now have the cheapest industrial electricity in the world. And you can see it on the screen now. These numbers are a little dated, but the proportions hold true. Our folks are paying half the price as the average industrial user in Europe. And that's a really big deal if you're a very large power consumer or you're a large factory like Alcoa. Around 40% of your costs every month at a facility may be electricity. And that's why industrial real estate has really been booming. That's why we've seen such this transition in the energy space has been truly revolutionary. And solar has been able to compete and come on stronger and stronger every year, even in this environment where more traditional sources of energy are coming online and prices, relatively speaking, are very cheap. So very quickly about Brownfield listings. We're an ecosystem, really. We're talking about brownfields and grayfields and brightfields. We kind of plug in all of these different silos and specialists within the real estate world. We try to capture all this innovation, but you can do just several simple things on our website, like list properties. You can post projects. We have kind of a project mode, and then you can find pros as well. So people can post profiles. So everybody has something to list on Brownfield listings. And who's involved? Really everyone. I'm sure on the phone is a very diverse audience of people. There's all kinds of professionals who get involved. You may just be involved as a spectator almost, or as a neighbor at a big redevelopment in your community, and things like that. But it takes a village. US EPA has great programs. Virginia DEQ has great programs. And there's a lot of ways that we can try to, pull a brownfield out of limbo and back into productive use. We think of it really as like a brownfield community. Brownfieldlistings.com is instant project infrastructure. You can kind of snap this stuff up really quickly on the fly. You don't need your own website. You can invite your team. You can share a dashboard. You can upload primary materials and start planning. And this is just kind of what it looks like, summarizing a lot of information. There's the fun tags down at the bottom. The tags on this screen is gray field and a vacant site. This was a project in Minnesota. But we'll come back to those tags in just a second. We're really a due diligence clearinghouse. There's a lot of substance on brownfieldlistings.com, and these are the categories under our listing. There's over 400 fields of information. You don't have to fill them all out. In fact, it will only show what you do fill out. So sometimes filling out just a couple fields is a good strategy, but you can build a complete due diligence prospectus if you're so inclined. And this is our taxonomy of tags. There's a lot of different ways that sites can be classified. A brownfield is really like a box of chocolates. You never know until you start digging and digging and digging, and sometimes it costs a lot more. But as complicated as it can be, and all the beefy reports and our big due diligence prospectus, we are boiling it down to some very simple things, because some of these categories are prime movers. I want to draw your attention to the very, very bottom. Solar Brightfield is what we're talking about today. It's been our biggest sub-segment within our universe of redevelopment. Brightfields has been one of the most active spaces, and it's because of the economics that I mentioned, but also there's all kinds of value and reasons why putting solar on certain parcels just makes sense. For example, landfills, where you really can't do anything else, but the solar panels aren't going to hurt the landfill, and vice versa. And so more and more communities, landowners, they have all these kind of vacant land that's not doing anything, not necessarily landfill, greenfield. You can make money off this stuff. This is a landfill that's on the screen in Amesbury, Massachusetts. And this was the second landfill that little Amesbury, Massachusetts turned into a Brightfield. They put solar PV on top, put out an RFP, and they actually sell 100% of the power up there in Massachusetts. And so the community really loves it, because every month the town just collects checks from a landfill that was previously sitting there doing nothing. Actually, 2 landfills. They came to the last Brightfield Marketplace event. They've come to a couple events, and they got over 40 interested parties in this landfill. So solar developers responding to the RFP that they put together and put out. So it was a big success. They had their pick, and they were really able to price aggressively and negotiate a strong contract. I don't have time to get into all of these, but I'll show you some just more examples. The one on the left, the Elmore, is actually a green field. This was kind of leftover property, a commercial park that they decided wasn't on any kind of near-term horizon. But solar is a long-term interim option if you want to think about that. We'll come back to that land in 20 years, but in the meantime, let's earn some electrons. And then the Kirby Tower Recycling Facility was another RFP that has been featured on our site and at our events. And it was a very contaminated site. But again, solar lines up even while the risk of a site is being worked down, while it's being remediated, or it's long-term monitoring and maintenance. Solar is a way to tap into the economic potential of the property while it's moving through its remediation process. And there's all kinds of ways to structure that. And that's what we'll be getting into more at the conference, is some of the ways that these deals are put together. There's several deal-making sessions. We can walk through some of these RFPs and some of these examples to see how some people are doing it. Because there is a lot of creativity. The one on the screen now is put together. It's an RFP, again, published on our website from the Connecticut Materials Innovation and Recycling Authority, MIRA, and it was a 3-in-1. So they put 3 landfills together. We're kind of going to do it all at once. And it didn't end up happening that way, I don't think, but when you are proactive with your due diligence and you are putting 4 corners around your own information, you have a lot more latitude in how you choose to move forward. And so Brightfields 2019 Virginia is coming down April 9 and 10 to Richmond, downtown Richmond, at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, which is a beautiful facility. Come one, come all. Anyone can come. It's a great event if you want to learn about solar. If you're a professional, you want some of the latest market and policy updates. Vince and Mead will both be there. A lot of other local and regional regulatory folks will be there talking about their programs. And we'll be covering that critical path. Like, what does it take to go from zero to completion on a Brightfield project in Virginia and the region. And so there's a lot of issues that overlap, like a solar project on any green field, but we do dig into some of the more complicated sites, the landfills, the Superfund sites, and some of those very, very specific issues. As Vince mentioned, landowners and communities, if you have a potential site, you can attend for free. You can come sit in what's called the Solar Market Mixer. It's kind of an active networking event, like round robin style, or speed dating. There's no obligations, of course, but it's just a great way to meet a lot of people all at once, collect cards, develop relationships, and start to get into the marketplace and start to understand what the Brightfield world was all about. Who are these Brightfield heroes that are getting these solar panels on these marginal lands? And we'll be focusing specifically in several sessions. We've got some great speakers on mine-scarred land, abandoned mine land, and some of those, not just the specific and direct issues of converting them into bright fields, but some of the peripheral issues related to community revitalization. We've got some speakers from regional groups who have been doing incredible, heroic work to advance, solar, but some of the other strategies. We've got some great speakers coming about pollinators. We call it the greenfield angle because you can develop the flora and fauna on the PV sites. That's great for the surrounding habitat. For the butterflies and the bees will love it. And so it is a renaissance time. There's all kinds of things happening. We can stack these things together. And we can talk about the triple bottom line or green development that makes green, but the economics have changed finally too. And so sustainability is starting to make economic sense. And we're very excited to be involved in Brightfields and the Brightfield space just because of the way that it's come on, how it plays into the larger structural evolution of our economy and the scalable potential that it has for all those thousands and thousands of acres of mine-scarred land, which, let's be honest, is going to take decades. But we can put that land to work and capture back some of its potential while we undo kind of 400 years of industrial revolution. But the future is very bright, and we'll be turning it up in Richmond. I look forward to meeting some of the folks on the phone in person. Thank you. So up next is Benoy, who is a real solar expert, and I don't know how oh, there we go. Perfect.
Hi, this is Benoy.
Benoy, take it away.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Thank you, Virginia DEQ and Brownfield Listings for having me on the webinar today. My name is Benoy Thanjan. I'm the CEO and founder of Reneu Energy. And Dan asked me to talk a little bit about solar, what we're seeing in the U.S. and specifically about the Virginia market. I know, that some of the people maybe on the call are not familiar with solar and what's happening. And as Dan said, it's a huge growth opportunity, basically solar on brownfields or greenfields, as we could call it. A little bit about my background. Reneu Energy, we're a solar and storage developer. We're also a consulting firm. We develop solar projects in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and California. We're actually working on a pretty innovative project right now. We're developing 1.3 megawatts of a community solar portfolio in New York City with the New York Housing Authority, where we're developing on 35 different buildings in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And then people in the utility service territory of Con Ed could actually buy electricity through virtual net metering through a credit that they get on their billing through Con Ed and buy actually solar directly from the community solar portfolio. We first started in business with RECs, where we brokered about 28 million in REC transactions. REC is basically a renewable energy credit that represents 1 megawatt hour of energy or renewable energy. And that's an incentive that certain states have created to incentivize the development of renewables. The big states for that are New Jersey, Massachusetts, Maryland, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, DC as well. We also source financing for projects. We also help with long-term energy offtake for solar projects. I also have a podcast actually called the Solar Maverick Podcast, where we talk about solar and entrepreneurship. And it's on all the major podcast platforms. iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, Spotify. So if you want to learn more about the solar industry, we have industry experts usually speaking every week. My background before I started the company, Reneu Energy, about 6.5 years ago, I worked in project finance for Solar City, which was a national solar installer that merged with Tesla in 2016. I also worked for another solar installer called Vanguard Energy Partners that's built over 100 megawatts of projects. And then I worked in renewables at a private equity firm called Ridgewood Renewable Power, where I analyzed investments in renewable energy projects, landfill gas projects, hydroelectricity, and biomass. At that point, I was into solar. And then I worked at Deloitte and Touche in their energy structured finance practice. So going into the basics of solar, solar power is the conversion of energy from sunlight into electricity, primarily using photovoltaics. I actually like this chart or this diagram that SunPower came with. It basically shows the sunlight photons hitting the solar panel, and then basically the solar panel converting the sunlight into DC energy. And then you have basically an inverter that basically changes DC to AC, which is usable electricity, and that is usually used to power homes or it goes into the grid. Incentives for solar. Why is now a great time for solar? Really, the federal incentives have helped develop solar. So basically, there are two primary incentives on the federal level. There's an investment tax credit, where 30% of the tax credit of your solar system, you get a credit for that. And then there's accelerated depreciation, where instead of doing straight line depreciation for the useful life of the facility, which is usually 20 to 30 years, you could actually depreciate within 5 years. There's also a bonus depreciation component. And this is huge because it basically translates over this 5 years, 50% of the cost of the system is basically paid for through federal incentives. Currently, there are no state level incentives in solar in Virginia, but there still has been a lot of development. These next few slides are actually from SEIA. They're the Solar Energy Industry Association. They're the biggest lobbying group in solar. And you could see that this investment tax credit that I spoke to you about basically led to a lot of construction. There was first actually a cash grant. It was called the 1603 grant, and then basically an investment tax credit. And you'll see, it basically shows the exponential, development that we've seen in solar from 2007 to now. And also another big reason for solar increasing substantially is basically falling prices. So here you see in 2009, the blended average solar PV price was $750. Now in 2017, they haven't come out, sorry, in 2018, they haven't come out with the actual 2018 numbers. It was $270 per watt. So there has been a huge decrease in the cost of solar. It's specifically been solar panels itself. So the price of panels the past 4 or 5 years have gone down 400 to 500%. But it's also been the inverters that we talked about before, the racking where you put the panels on. We've also, as a country, gotten more efficient in building these projects, and that has all led to the cost decreases that we have seen in solar and making it more economical. The other key thing is actually the technology as well. So the capacity factor for the panels have increased dramatically, meaning the amount of sunlight that you could actually turn into usable energy. So only a few years ago, the capacity factors were around 12 to 13%. Now we're seeing 18 to 20, some of the newer panels, even 22%. So all these different things, the federal incentive, the falling prices, and the capacity have led to solar being economical and growing substantially because of that. Here's kind of a snapshot of the U.S. solar industry. California is the top state for solar. That's primarily due to they have very high electricity costs, and also they get a lot of sunlight. So it makes it very economical to do solar projects in California. And also they used to have like a rebate program to incentivize development. A lot of people ask me, how is like New Jersey and Massachusetts a top 10 solar state when they don't get as much sunlight as the other states. The big thing is that they have high electricity costs and also strong state level incentives. They both had this SREC program, which is a solar renewable energy credit, that basically enabled a lot of development of solar and renewable energy. This slide is basically giving a perspective of Virginia at a glance. To date, or to basically the end of 2018, it's been 656.3 megawatts that have been installed. Virginia is the 17th ranked state for solar, and it's 1.14% solar energy is produced for the total electricity generation, which is very small, which will increase substantially in the future. They're projecting, SIA, who actually came out with this, with 2,470 megawatts over the next 5 years in Virginia, ranking at 8. So basically, they're saying it's almost going to grow from 656.3 megawatts to 2,470, almost 4 times more in the next 5 years. So it's an exciting time with a lot of growth. So definitely, attending the Brownfield events is definitely a great opportunity coming up in just a few weeks, which is crazy how quickly time flies by. And here's another chart that SIA provided, and you could see that really only solar has started to be installed really starting in 2013, then 15, and then 2017 was a big year, and then it actually decreased in 2018. The reason why we saw the decrease in installation, specifically utility scale projects, were that there was tariffs basically put by the White House on solar panels and inverters, and then also the steel tariffs as well, which impacted the development of solar and led to less construction. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of a drop from comparing 2017 to 2018. But over the long term, the tariffs are stepping down, and there's still a lot of opportunity for solar to grow, and specifically in Virginia. Dominion is actually the leading developer of solar projects in Virginia. Obviously they're the utility, or the main utility in Virginia. And the reason why they've actually developed a lot of solar is due to their corporate customers. A lot of companies have goals of 100% renewables, and they want their power from renewable energy projects, specifically solar. So a lot of the projects that they have development has related to data centers, specifically, with Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. So, all three of these companies have goals of 100% renewables, and to basically, help their customers, they develop these projects, and they're still developing these projects to basically have 100% renewable energy goals. You'll see as well, I know this box is pretty small, but PPAs are also very important as far as financing of projects. So that's a power purchase agreement, which usually is for around 20 to 25 years. And basically that allows the solar project to be financed when there is a strong credit-worthy entity. You'll see, for example, the Cherrydale project, which has which is a 20 megawatt system and been in service since November, has a PPA with Old Dominion Electric Cooperative. And then there's facilities that are coming online with Amazon related to current and future data centers, both in Northern Virginia and Ohio. And basically, the projects that are in service and Dominion is developing is around 656 megawatts. Some notable Virginia solar news is the 2018 Virginia Energy Master Plan calls for 3 gigawatts of solar and wind by 2022. Also on February 20th, D.E. Shaw agreed to basically to a PPA for 300 megawatts of solar power with Novak, and basically those projects are supposed to come online on 2023. And then the next slide is kind of what I was talking about before, that companies are really having goals of 100% renewables, or they want more of their fuel mix or electricity mix to be in renewables. This is a slide from Business Renewable Center, and you'll see that 2018 was a banner year for corporate PPAs, where companies are basically buying electricity, specifically renewable energy from solar and wind off-site. You could see that Facebook and Microsoft in 2018 are one of the biggest buyers of electricity from these types of projects, and that's why a lot has also been done in Virginia, and Dominion has been working with these companies to make sure that they achieve their goals. And then here's another slide just on top 25 corporate solar users. Basically, this shows how many are actually using it on site and then doing corporate PPAs. This is just reiterating the fact that corporations are really pushing to have more renewables in their electric when they're using their electricity. And then here's my contact information. We have an office in New York, which is actually in Jersey City, New Jersey, right across the water from New York City, and in San Diego. And I will, be in the event in Richmond in next month, and I look forward to meeting everyone. And thank you, everyone, for your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Benoy. That was great. And up next, we've got Paul Curran, who is a solar developer, and he has really a trailblazer, tremendous experience focusing on these landfills and some of these more problematic brownfields and flipping them into brightfields. There's Paul.
There he is.
Paul.
Thanks very much, Ann. So for the folks on the phone, you've heard a little bit that Virginia is a place where they would like to redeploy brownfields and landfills for beneficial use. You've heard from Dan that there are a lot of landfills nationwide, and you just heard from Benoy that solar is an attractive and growth market. What I want to talk about now is kind of that solar on brownfields is not really blazing a new trail. It's being done nationwide quite regularly, and the trail has really been blazed. There's several examples of projects, and most of the issues that you would expect to encounter in the development of solar on brownfields really we've kind of gotten to already. We work with the EPA federally, we work with most states at least in concept, and we're going from there. That's not my police. Sorry, maybe somebody could come again. Thank you. DEQ Energy, the obligatory commercial for us, we have a worldwide experience in developing solar and wind projects on brownfields, landfills. We originally started doing mostly wind projects back in 2002, 2003. Eventually around 2009 or 10, solar became cheaper, and today we do mostly solar projects. The size range there are pretty typical of projects that you'd see. On landfill projects, you'll see smaller, generally solar projects than might have been popular in what Benoy was showing nationwide, largely due to the size. Brownfields projects can be all over the place, and some of the mining properties that Vince mentioned before can host a very sizable solar project, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. We do own some projects. We develop them and bring in outside financing, as Benoy was alluding to. And we're based in the Hudson Valley, but we are working on projects pretty much throughout the eastern U.S. and a couple out west as well. Here's just 5 projects that we pick out of the hat and show you a couple of recent ones. The 2 wind projects up top are, again, about one of them's quite old in the Netherlands. That got us our start. Another project, if you fly into Buffalo, you'll see right on Lake Erie, a wind farm that we did up there. And then 3 recent landfill projects, and these all happen to be landfills. I realized I should have pulled the brownfield out to include in there, but the Beacon project is located near us. You can see the Hudson River on the left side of that picture. It's a 3 megawatt project, which is pretty typical. 3 megawatts uses up about 15 or 20 acres of land, and that's a relatively larger size landfill. We see a lot of 5 to 10 acre landfills throughout the Northeast United States, and that's not unusual. The Patterson project's been operating for 4 years now, 5 coming up on, also in the Hudson Valley area. And then the Annapolis project, I really should have used one with the panels on there, was started up last year. That's 18 megawatts, and that is still the largest landfill-based solar project in the United States. It started up last June, I believe was the exact date. It's been operating quite well. So why do you want to do this? And kind of this is sort of our strategy document, and I'll talk later about how it gets deployed. but it's pretty common that most states want more solar. And I did chuckle when I saw Benoy saying that you know, Virginia only has 1% solar on the grid so far. 1% is enormous historically, and getting up to 1% has taken a long time. But most states would like to see that number quite a bit higher. Solar is coincident with the peak usage in most states. So when it's really, really hot in the summertime and you come home and you crank up the air conditioner during the daytime, that's when solar is really, you know, putting out its maximum production. So it's quite grid friendly in most areas of the country. Solar occupies a good bit of land, 4 to 5 acres per megawatt is generally true. You need some buffer land. I'll talk more about that. Electric grid generating capacity, you want the power to be in and around cities. So you need a lot of land and you need it near cities or where people live. And the good news about that is most municipalities had a landfill. Most of them closed around 1990 due to some federal legislation back then. So what we're seeing here is you need a lot of land, you need it near cities, and most places, most cities have landfills available. It makes a nice trend, and when you get through the bureaucracy and the siting issues and so forth, it makes it really a very attractive option. Brownfield, similarly, you know, the old steel mill, the old oil refinery, again, located near population centers. Oftentimes they have power lines, which is something that we spend a lot of time trying to make sure we can do. So I'm not going to tell you what a landfill is, but it's a pile of garbage underneath the ground, which really has no purpose, no useful use after it's been closed appropriately. We turn it into a solar farm, and we do that with a great deal of respect for the landfill itself. The landfill has an environmental integrity and environmental purpose. It exists to protect the environment, and the solar project has to understand the first basic rule that it can do no harm to the existing landfill environmental integrity. What we're doing when we go to a landfill, if somebody calls us up, and we get a lot of calls every day, I made a note that I was, throughout the day here, and I got in about 8 o'clock this morning, I've been talking to people about 17 different projects that we're working on right now, some operating, some in development and so forth. And that's pretty typical that there's a lot of people looking at this application for both brownfields and landfills. You need enough room. You need the site to be closed for at least 10 years. The reason for that is that garbage tends to decompose in a landfill, so the site will settle. And if you have a structure on there, a brownfield, a solar facility, you really don't want differential settlement underneath your solar field. So you want it to be settled or closed for at least 10 years to allow for that settlement to largely go away. You want the right state, and you want the right state for both solar purposes, that is a state that wants solar, and also one that wants to redeploy landfill spaces and so forth. And as you've heard, Virginia fits both categories and fits quite nicely and so forth. You need power lines, and you need somebody to buy the electricity, and we'll talk more about that when we meet in Virginia next month. In the background, by the way, you can see that happens to be the Greenfield, Massachusetts facility. It was the first solar facility permitted in the state of Massachusetts on a landfill. It's been up and running for about 7 or 8 years now, operating very well and so forth. And you can see in there the foundations, which don't enter the ground, but those concrete blocks behind the two gentlemen are basically sitting on the ground, and that serves as the anchor for the facility to be held in place. Here again is a couple of pictures of both a precast, which is the blocks on the right, and a pour in place where you put a couple of tubs out and basically go in and pour concrete to anchor it. What you're trying to do is avoid liftoff. Solar panels are kind of light and tend to be lifted in high winds. You have to make sure that they stay on the ground at all times. A couple of other issues: you want to avoid steep slopes. For construction reasons, we need to make sure that we can build the facility, and you also have to consider drainage issues and a couple of others. I'm not going to go into what a brownfield. This definition in New York is very similar to what Vince showed for, or me did for the state of Virginia. There's lots of them. These sites are unfortunately quite prevalent throughout many other places, and it was alluded to mining properties and coal properties. We're doing a lot more work on those types of lands throughout the United States now, for a lot of reasons, one of which is that those types of properties tend to have large power lines available, in addition to large amounts of land. Again, what we're looking for there is, clear ownership. Is the site records intent Is the EPA in charge? Is the state in charge? Does everybody agree who's in charge? Has it been closed for a while? Is there litigation done? We're not looking to pay the bill to close a brownfield site. These projects are not profitable, and to do that, what we're looking to do is to kind of redeploy the land, which really doesn't have a purpose immediately. Generally speaking, I think it does work well, but you can see here there is an issue, and there's some wind turbines in the background there, but on many brownfields there are existing structures. Structures cause shade, and we have to worry about shading as we go through as well. So why do this? Why put solar on brownfields and landfills? It does take more time, and BQ Energy does nothing but renewable energy projects on brownfields and landfills. We don't work on cow pastures or other, vacant land, farmland, that kind of thing. We only work on brownfields and landfills. So we know it's going to take more time to permit because the agencies are going to be wanting to know what we're going to do, and it does cost a little bit more to build than it might on a cow pasture, and it does not sell electricity for a higher price. So if we sell electricity to a customer and somebody else is trying to sell from any other source, we don't get a premium because we're making it on a brownfield or landfill. But there may be existing unused power lines, which can save us some money, might bring the cost of construction down. The land should be cheaper, and the public acceptance is always generally greater. Once people understand that you're talking about putting solar panels on the old landfill or the old brownfield, generally speaking, public acceptance is quite significant and quite recognized. The EPA and most states have recognized that deploying these types of land for this is really a very good idea, and we've been quite successful at it. We look forward to meeting you all in Virginia, in Richmond next month. I think I would probably throw it back to either Dan or Vince.
Yeah, we've had a couple questions come in, so now's your time to submit your questions. You've been hit with a lot of information, and we would like to hear from you and to answer some of these questions. I'm going to start out with one that I'm going to toss to Dan. What is a gray field and what is a blue field?
Great questions. First, I have to say that it really depends on, the right answer depends on the state that you're in. Even a brownfield, the definition of a brownfield, there's a federal definition, but then each state has its own definition. So in New York, for example, Paul just mentioned New York and its definition, it's very restrictive. Brownfield basically means that it has to be contaminated. But in Michigan, you can put anything in the brownfield program. Basically, it doesn't have to be environmentally contaminated. It just has to be previously developed. And so that works a lot of infrastructure issues, grading issues, stormwater, whatever. And so we might think of the Michigan definition of brownfield as covering gray fields. So a gray field is a property that's been previously developed, previously used, but is not environmentally contaminated. It is not a brownfield or a Superfund site. In the state of New Jersey, they have narrowly defined gray field to mean just what I've mentioned, but specifically to a commercial property. So particularly like a strip mall, that's what they call gray field, and they have incentives specifically geared towards that. And then finally, I'll say blue field is a new one. It's more in use in Europe and in the UK. But a blue field basically means a site that's on the waterfront or in the floodplain. And the EPA Brownfield program just got its criteria adjusted. You'll get extra points. They don't call it a blue field, but in your application, you'll get extra points if your site or if your project is either on the waterfront or it's in a floodplain.
That's their problem.
All right, in Virginia, I would add, Dan, that we view anything that's perceived to have environmental issues, which could be an industrial site with chemical pollutants or even asbestos and lead in an old building. So we have a very broad definition. We don't really get into the gray fields. Most things tend to fall into what we would consider a brownfield, just potential or perceived contamination or issues on the site.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. We had one earlier that was, I think, may have been addressed, but landfill development. So what are the issues with settlement over time on landfills? I think that was answered in our last presentation. You want to add anything, Paul?
No, settlement can be quite severe in the first couple of years. As I say, most landfills or many landfills were closed in the 1990s due to federal regulations. So most of them have settled as much as they're going to, but it is a significant issue that you have to watch out for.
And as Meade mentioned, we in Virginia, we think at least 650 of these old landfills across the state pre-regulation, and those have been setting for a long time. A lot of the settlements happen. That's going to happen, and you would know a lot more about the site. So any other questions before we wrap this up? I keep waiting on my little box to appear with the new questions. If nothing else, I hope folks will realize that in Virginia there's a solar revolution coming. As the data you've seen, we're right for solar development here in Virginia. We hope in the Brownfields program to see more of that done on brownfield properties and other previously used lands. We're not against greenfield development. This conference will encompass all of that. And we hope that you will sign up or you will share this with people that are interested in Brightfields and help join the revolution. Dan, do you have any parting words for folks?
No, the future is very bright. There's a lot of these sites that have piled up over the last few centuries of industrial progress, and that's oftentimes the bad news. But the good news is we know what to do, and we can do this stuff. There's a lot of exciting work to do. It's going to employ a lot of people. It's going to be good for our communities. It's going to make us more sustainable, and all these things. And so we're really excited to just put the pieces together. Brightfields 2019 Virginia is about getting all the right people thinking about solar in the same place at the same time. So whether you're just starting out and you want to learn more what this is about, or like Amesbury, Massachusetts, you have an RFP or you're about to put together an RFP and you want to come, meet a lot of solar developers or at least understand what the market can do for your site, then there's no better chance to come down in person in Richmond and see for yourself.
So thanks everybody for participating. That'll wrap up our webinar. We hope to see you in Richmond. Thank you.
Very good.